Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Fireside Streams. My name is Carrera, the Culture Director at Fashion Snoops, and I am pleased to be with a very special guest today, Professor of Psychology at Assumption College and author of Hivemind, the new science of tribalism in our divided world, Dr. Sarah Rose Cavanagh. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be going through our fall/winter 22-23 sentiment, hope. Just a bit about this sentiment. We may think of hope as a kind of fluffy wishful thinking, but in truth, hope is incredibly hard work. Today's world has brought upon us endless bad news, divisions, climate collapse, and fractures in our humanity. And although these problems may seem, so complex and insurmountable to face, hope is really the fuel that is guiding us forward to, really allow us to persevere into, the next phase of our culture. So, Sarah, I think that you will be an excellent person to speak to us on this. Your book is so incredibly hopeful. I'd like to start by first asking you about the hive mind. What is the hive mind, and what are some of your favorite scientific research behind this collective cultural phenomena?
Great. So I think the concept of the hive mind is somewhat a little bit more of a cultural or a philosophical one than a scientific one, although I will tell you about some of my favorite scientific basis for it. But really, it's the fact that we form consensus thoughts and emotions and feelings. And when we experience the world together and kind of sync up together, it can nudge us almost into a collective sort of consciousness where we're experiencing the world. And we don't flock like birds or swarm like ants, but I think that we do sync up, and that through processes like emotional contagion or sharing of emotion, and also social conformity, we can really experience the world together. And so my favorite science behind it really has to do with synchrony and the fact that we are synchronous beings. We tend to sync up our facial expressions, our mannerisms. If we're walking together, we tend to fall in step with each other. And I think that's really fascinating. And there's some work on neural synchrony, or the fact that our brain activity also lines up. And there's some great work by a neuroscientist, Talia Wheatley, and she finds that she can take the brains of friends and strangers, an entire social network, and scan them while they watch YouTube clips. And then statistically, she can predict who's friends with whom based on how their brains react to YouTube clips, which is pretty wild, I think. And so we are this collective species, I think, as well as we are an individual one.
Amazing. How do you think the internet has, assisted us in creating the hive mind? And what do you think the future of that might be?
Great. Well, I think that the internet really operated as kind of an accelerant. So this synchrony has always been with us. I think, anthropologists find evidence of it. You can see it in every human culture. And so it's something that we've always done. But of course, what the internet does is it gives us a new medium. The degree to which we can synchronize is much more spread out and among a lot more human beings rather than our cluster of human beings we spend our daily life with. And so I think that it has accelerated this synchrony, and it has amplified both the positives and the negatives. And so the negatives are easy to see. And I think that we spend a lot of time talking about the negatives in terms of polarization and, people piling on, and moral outrage and things like that. But I think that the internet has also amplified the positives and allowed us to connect in ways that we couldn't before, and also allows people who may otherwise be isolated, especially, before the pandemic, certain people were isolated in their homes who might have struggled with depression or had mobility issues, and it allowed them to reach out and form social networks. And now that we've all been sequestered in our homes, I think that we've really seen the power of the internet and social media to connect us when we can't physically be together.
After reading your book, I felt this great sense of like humanistic optimism, like maybe we can solve
Oh.
these divisions, the echo chambers, these information silos that are plaguing our world. Do you think that there's like a scientific basis or a cultural basis for a hopeful future based on this conception of hive mind?
I hope so, and I think so, and that's why I wrote the book that way. And I think one of the really dramatic things to me when I look at the psychological research is that human beings are prone to having these tight in groups, and that can lead to rejecting the out group. But what research has also really clearly demonstrated is that those in groups are flexible. And I think that we've all seen this and experienced this. If you think about, you have your in group of, your social class and your neighborhood and all of these things. But we also choose in groups based on, movies that we like, subcultures that we belong to, fandoms, right? And sports teams. And so we can choose our in groups, and we can choose how narrowly versus widely we define those in groups. And that to me is where the hope really is. If we can spread out these in groups and how we define them, and to include many more human beings, and define them really flexibly, then we can treat each other a lot better, I think.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I think that that has provided, so much insight into the idea of hope as a sentiment, where we might be headed next. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us again.